The freeze dryer has been running all night long. We're about 22 hours into the entire process and the food is ready to come out.
No defrost or defrost?
No defrost.
Okay, open the drain valve, right?
Open the drain valve. Release the vacuum.
Yeah, otherwise you couldn't get that door open if your life depended on it. Okay. There we go. Yep, no cold spots.
Now I have one tray of freeze-dried strawberries. I'm going to split this up into a couple of packages. We're packaging right now for when we go camping, so having food that's in the right kind of portions is a good idea. The strawberries are one full-size large container of strawberries. I'm going to put about 1/3 of these strawberries into a 1-pint mylar bag. Taste test.
Those are good. They're like candy. This is one of the most important tools you can have when you're doing this. Because unlike vacuum sealing, where you can actually see what's in the containers, once you've sealed one of these mylar bags, it's a mystery. And we see this all the time, even among the more competent freeze dryers, where they'll sit there and go, and I have no idea what's in this, so we'll see what it turns out to be.
That usually happens when somebody's first freeze drying.
Right. Another thing you have to be careful about is you really need to open if you have the bottoms that are, what do they call them, pleated?
A gusseted
bottom. You need to open that before you put anything in it. Otherwise, it's hard to do it without dumping the stuff out. And what he will do is he will get this in there, and I will write on it the date and the contents.
Now we're using mylar bags. We've tried using the vacuum seal bags that come with seal meal and food saver kind of products. The problem is that the plastic is a little more fragile than what you really need for freeze-dried food. Since we don't want to be driving 2,000 miles and having our food all coming apart, I'm going to leave those over there for right now, and have them all come apart, we're spending a little extra money to put our food into these mylar bags.
Yeah, we found that the freeze-dried food can actually be sort of sharp. And even though we packed it carefully, like I was layering the stuff into a box and stuff like that, and not crushing it or anything like that, we found that probably as much as, depending on the batch, as much as a quarter of the vacuum bags would eventually lose their vacuum because they would be punctured by the food, simply jostling against other things. And that's not the point. The point is to have this stuff really solidly there for you when you want it. So spending the extra money actually winds up being cheaper than losing things. Fortunately, we realized that this was a problem pretty quickly last time, so we actually were able to use things that had accidentally gotten punctured.
Yeah, it's going to be a little noisy because everything is
crunchy and crinkly.
The mylar bags make noise, the freeze-dried food makes noise.
Yeah, and you'll see me shake it down because I have to have the stuff down below where that line is. That line is a reseal line. Now, for a lot of things, you won't ever use that reseal line. It's just like on a regular Ziploc or something. But for things like strawberries, which we're viewing as a snack food for camping, it's possible that we might only want a couple of pieces and then come back to it later, so you want to be able to close it up. A lot of the foods, you'll never close anything up because you'll be making a meal, and then that meal will be consumed completely. I do have a little bit more room in the first one, because that's not going to seal.
I can take care of these.
Yeah, he's gonna throw himself on that problem. In addition to the food, eventually they're going to get oxygen absorbers, but not until the last minute, because we don't want to open the oxygen absorbers until we're ready to use them. Now, what I usually do is sort of smush this a little bit to make sure I'm going to actually be able to close it. And I'll readjust anything. At this point, I sort of close the top. Now recognize we live in a very dry climate. So if I lived in, Missouri, South Carolina, someplace like that where it's going to be a much higher percentage humidity, I would probably make more of an effort to get this stuff done even quicker. Now, before we start to do this, we have everything set. We have the kitchen counters cleaned. We have all the supplies out that we need. We try never to have to go look for something while we're doing things, because you don't want this stuff open longer than you have to.
Now, we're doing one kind of fruit this time that we haven't done before, and that's bananas. So I suppose we ought to give it a shot.
Yep.
Crunchy.
I'm curious because I remember dehydrated bananas, as in the form of banana chips, from what I call my granola days in college, when we were learning to make yogurt and it was back to the land sort of stuff. And honestly, I never liked banana chips that much because they were usually too sweet. Now these have not been sweetened. These have not had anything weird done to them.
I just let them ripen a little more than what most people would like to eat. The skins were starting to get a little bit of brown spots. What that does is allows the fruit to ripen more.
Mm-hmm. Those are not bad.
Not my favorite.
Not my favorite, no. It'd be interesting to figure out something to do with those, though.
Oh, I think we can use them with some yogurt for breakfast or
yeah, I think
like
they'd be great with something else that has a little tang to it, so I think yogurt would be perfect. Because they're still sweet. Bananas are a thing that I can only eat some of the time. Sometimes they're just too sweet for me. I love them in banana bread. Now, I, of course, have bananas mashed in my teeth.
You taste it for hours.
I know. It's kind of, we joke about having a snack for later.
We're packaging up a whole series of products that have cooked before or prepared that can just be rehydrated. We'll talk more about rehydrating later. But banana chips is one. You already saw strawberries. And strawberries, when I set these up, I put a very small amount of sugar. I'm talking about a tablespoon in that entire batch of strawberries. And that was because I wanted to force some of the liquid to come out and be available if I decide to rehydrate them. But I think Irene's right. I think we'll just eat them as snacks.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things we were looking for is when you're traveling in a vehicle or when you're setting up camp or even in camp, one of the issues is snacks that you can eat without making a mess. You don't have easy access to a sink. Yes, it's possible to use hand wipes or some other thing. It's possible to, go back to the kitchen and wash your hands. But it's so much nicer if you can literally just do this and knock a little dust off and get on with your life. especially when you're setting up. You really don't want to be taking the time to do a lot of stuff.
Now, everything else that I've packaged up this morning has been dry. There's been no greasiness or anything else like that. And these are different. It's worth tasting it.
Not bad. These are hot dogs. When we are setting up at a camping event, one of our standard fallback meals for the first night there is to cut hot dogs up into what we call pennies, in other words, little slices, at home, brown them a little bit in the pan, and then have a can of beans. And that means that with virtually no effort and just a little bit of heating, you can have a satisfying camp dinner super easily, and you brought it from home, so you don't have the overhead that you would have if you had to go down to, you know, a food vendor at the event and spend all of a sudden $20 for a hot dog. So we decided that since we do have to heat the beans, because, well, Henry will eat beans cold. I don't care for beans cold. So we normally would heat the beans and the hot dogs in them. Sometimes we would have that stuff frozen. How much easier would it be? How much safer would it be in terms of if you run out of ice or something like that, to have the stuff freeze-dried instead? Now, we know that hot dogs will not have the shelf stability that some other things will do because of the grease. Now, you put a lot more in that second one than this one. Do you want to?
That's fine.
Okay. One of the things we're figuring out is portions, and we've experimented with it a little bit at home, because behind the scenes we've been doing a lot of freeze drying and a lot of taste testing. And we haven't showed that because, well, it didn't make sense to show people if we weren't happy with it, the results. It is different freeze drying than it is canning.
Or freezing.
Or
Ordinary
freezing. Yeah. The biggest thing I would say is when you freeze food, the spices and herbs and stuff like that will stay pretty much the same between when you've just cooked it and when you defrost it and go to eat it. If you are canning something, say like we have a recipe that we got from Homesteading Family for chicken chili. And
ooh, it's pretty spicy, that stuff.
Oh my goodness, when you can it, it's perfect. Perfect. Which is how they preserve theirs, is they can it. When you just freeze it,
ooh.
Yeah, the canning process actually significantly reduces the spiciness. And you have the same response when you freeze dry it. It takes away all the moisture. It doesn't take away any of the spiciness. And you can, you can light yourself up with that stuff. That is really spicy. So what we've actually done on this last batch of chili is we've toned back the spices a lot.
Yeah, mostly the cayenne. The original recipe calls for a full teaspoon of cayenne pepper, which I like hot stuff. This was a little bit on the edge for me and over the edge for Irene.
Right. Well, this last batch, we also had problems with the fact that the green chili we got was hotter than the previous batch. And green chili is always problematic that way because you never know exactly. It'll say medium, and one time you're like, okay, that's mild, and the next time you're like, oh gosh, where's my milk? You know? So
in case you don't know, if you eat something that's really hot and spicy, that's a capsicum of any kind, so any kind of pepper, if you're really concerned about it being too hot for you, drink a little milk, or you could actually have some whipping cream.
Yeah, well, that's what the guys at the competitions use. The judges at the competitions take a drink of cream and swish it around their mouth before they taste the stuff.
Now, this It kind of looks funny.
Ham steaks.
This is freeze-dried ham. We bought a small ham for ourselves for Easter. And we can't eat all of it at one time. Even if we eat it 3 meals a day, we can't eat it before it's going to spoil. So one of the things we did was we're trying to test freeze-drying.
Right. Now, we usually would freeze the extras and have them in the freezer so that if we wanted a quick meal, all we'd have to do is, you know, grab some sweet potatoes or something and a ham and everything else, and you got it.
And we have some that I froze in the freezer.
But we just decided to try the freeze drying process this time too. So we have test freeze dried before, so we know it works. Sometimes the ham will smush itself too much, and you wind up with slightly powdered ham. But the flavor is there. So if I were to take, say I wound up with it a little too squished, I could easily take that and throw it in eggs for breakfast.
Now, a lot of mornings Irene will eat French toast if I make it, or something that it will be kind of wet. And I think I make a decent French toast.
Yeah.
The problem is if we take eggs and milk and cream and fresh bread to go to an event, I guarantee you that at least half of it's going to spoil before the event's over, just because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You can run out of ice, as Irene mentioned. A lot of these events we go to, we'll get there as a vendor, and it'll be 2 or 3 days
before they bring ice on the site.
Ice on site.
We have to either go out and get it ourselves. We try and bring in as much as we can, and then we try and go out. Now, this one we're going to go to, they'll have ice pretty quickly there, because one of the food vendors is carrying the ice. Did you want to slice those, or did you want to leave them?
I'm going to leave these the way they are.
Okay.
This is French toast. Dry. Hard as a rock. I'm putting these into a quart mylar bag because they have to be rehydrated.
See, and I wasn't planning to rehydrate them.
No, what were you planning to do?
Eat them as a French toast stick.
Oh, we can try that in a minute. See what we think.
And see, that's always one of the big questions when you do this kind of stuff. Are you rehydrating, or are you eating it out of hand? What are you doing with it?
I think 4 pieces will fit in there, and that's about it.
Right. Let's see, French toast. Yeah, I would prefer to do it as a dry out of hand thing, because I don't need the gooiness of did you say 4 pieces? Yeah, 4.
You have 4 pieces in there.
Right. I'm writing. Want to write on there. 4 French toast.
Oh, one of the things I'll show you later on is I'll show you how I make French toast with old bread. You can let it get stale. You just don't want it to get moldy or otherwise infected with some kind of fungus. It's easy. It's a nice way to extend food, save food, but it does take a little bit of work.
But with the French approve.
The French would approve. In French, it's called pain perdu. It's lost bread. Because if you've ever eaten real French bread, it doesn't last even a day. It goes stale pretty quickly. So this is one way that you can make French bread last longer if you need to.
Another one is bread pudding.
I can make bread pudding too.
Which is actually one of my favorites.
Okay.
I could eat way too much for bread pudding. That'd be easy. Needs cinnamon. I almost asked you to put some cinnamon on some.
It's okay. It's bland.
Yeah, it's bland.
Because normally we use maple syrup on top of it, a little bit of butter, a little bit of maple syrup. So
yeah, it's bland. I was actually thinking about that because remember the other day I said I saw some frozen French toast at the grocery store? And things like that always crack me up because I'm like, who is so lazy that they can't make French toast themselves? The answer is lots of people, of course. But, I mean, that's no different than when we used to have waffles on hand from the store when the kids were in high school. But I was thinking, ooh, you know, would you want to use that? And I just realized I'm writing the wrong date on some of these. That's hysterical.
Well, I have one more thing to package up. I made some noodles Alfredo for a meal, and we ate it fresh for dinner. The next day I fried some up for Irene for lunch, along with a protein to go with it. And I have one serving here that's freeze-dried. I'm going to put this into a quart mylar container because I want to have room to reconstitute it. And this stuff will expand a little bit, but not a whole lot.
One of our goals with this process is to create a situation where we have fewer dishes at camping events. So yeah, we're going to have waste in the sense that we'll have the mylar bags. When we're at home, we try to use as much as possible reusable containers, things like the glass containers with the sealable lids and stuff like that. So when we have leftovers, we almost never use Ziploc bags in the fridge because we prefer not to be junking up the world with our used bags. At camping events, we simply have to, we used to do canned food, where we were actually canning food at home and bringing it. And it worked great in the sense that the food was delicious, it was easy to serve and all that kind of stuff.
It was heavy, it was messy, and glass jars have one big problem. When
They
you're
break.
traveling cross country, you hit a bump and you may lose food. So one of the problems that we had was we had a large box with a large amount of bubble wrap that we recovered from packaging that we received from other companies. That worked okay, but still sometimes you had a big jolt that would make the lid of the jar loosen up and you had spoiled food that was going around all inside the truck.
Yeah, now we never really had, because we were using plastic boxes and stuff like that, we never had, you know, like your nightmare scenario of winding up with food all over everything. However, Henry managed to cut himself a couple of times at events washing the jars.
Very badly. I put my hand inside to wash it.
And the jar shattered.
It shattered and it sliced my hand.
You wound up going to first aid for that because we couldn't make it stop bleeding. But it's just like the whole problem of then now you're dealing with your jars. You have to at least get them mostly washed and then store them to take them home.
And sometimes they break on the way home. And
Yeah.
sometimes you chip the lid.
Yeah, you wind up with that little chip on the rim that
Yep.
makes them useless for anything other than dry storage, you know. And so it became like, okay, that becomes an expendable in the sense that you ruin your jars. You
And
know,
I don't want to ruin a jar that costs more than $1 a piece.
yeah. So it's fine to use that. We know of a bunch of people who are freeze drying and using jars at home, because that's no different than the canning situation, except for it takes a lot less space for freeze dried stuff than it does for just plain canned stuff. Canning jars at home are fine in the pantry.
Well, let's tell everybody goodbye, and then in our next episode, we'll show you how Irene puts the oxygen absorbers into the packages and how many we put in and why. And I'll be using a special sealer to seal up these mylar bags.
Yep. So
Come on over here. I don't smell that bad. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bells for notifications because
we're always doing something.
we have more to do.
Lots. So, and keep on brainstorming because obviously we are.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.